If I could ask those in the narthex to please come on in so we can get our meeting started, I'd appreciate it. One or two more. Okay, we're mostly here. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. And the few people still in the narthex, join us as soon as they can. The first item of business is normally to assess a quorum. And with the pandemic and a lot of people doing this remotely, it's pretty much impossible to tell how many people we have. So I'm going to declare that we have a quorum. And if I hear no objection, it is so ordered. Okay, thank you. I'd like to call on John, if he'll open us with prayer.
Let us pray. O Holy One, we give you thanks for this wonderful collection of saints that is First Congregational Church. And we give you thanks that people have taken time out of their busy schedules to be here to discern the work of your church and to hear the great things that are going on. We pray that your Holy Spirit would be with us, that we can listen with open ears and open hearts to what others are saying, that we can engage freely and in a spirit of love with one another, so that we can work together to build up this fellowship, all to honor your holy name. Amen.
Thank you, John. Next, what we would normally do next is approve minutes, and the last minutes were from the congregational meeting in January, and I would like to postpone that until the next annual meeting. So if nobody objects, we will postpone the approval of the minutes from the last congregational meeting. Okay, real quickly before I start on the main agenda, I'd like to recognize and let everybody know a very special event. Paul and Shirley Titus are observing their 71st anniversary. On June 11th. You know, what a great model for all of us. Okay, the next item gives me great pleasure. The search committee and the church staff have been charged with finding a person for our new staff position, the Director of Membership and Administration. We've completed the task. That person is now with us and is part of the staff. We had well over 30 applicants. We interviewed seven. Some of them were quite strong. And we had a unanimous selection. Vicky Scheimer, who's with us today. And Vicki, if you wouldn't mind standing so we could recognize you and welcome you. Okay, next we're going to have 3 real items on the agenda to hear reports. And I'm going to call on first the report of the Campus Beautification Committee. They look like they're set up and ready to go here, so I'll call on them first. Oh, the Vision Committee. Okay, go for it. Okay.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Lynette Ross. I'm one of the members of the Visioning Committee. We're going to kind of tag team today. Just about everybody's going to do some part of the presentation. There's only one member of our committee that couldn't make it today, Clyde Metric, and so he's part of our remote team because we've been meeting in person as well as Zoom. Yes, and if you want to actually see the PowerPoint, you're probably going to have to shift over here, but we, yeah. So, you can slide to the next. Basically, the purpose of this meeting is to kind of give you an update of where we are as a visioning committee. And just as a little way of background, last year in January, we presented at the annual meeting a vision plan or a strategy. And our strategy for the year was to do some visioning, because we felt we were at a place in the congregation where this was the perfect time to really take a look at who we were, where we've been, and moving forward. And so the strategy for 2021 was to do a visioning process. And it came about as a book that John had recommended to him. And there were several of us on the church council who really felt inspired by the book as well. And so the original group, I think, was Chuck and Eric and Ann and myself. And so we kind of vetted the book and the process, and then came up with a presentation to the church council. And the church council said, yeah, we agree. We think this is a great idea. Well, then that presentation was presented to you in the congregation and was approved in January. And so then we started our work. And in summary, the two things to me that make this process different than perhaps anything we've ever done is the idea that the author has is that no two congregations are alike. No matter how many of them are doing the same ministries, trying to accomplish the same things, no two congregations are alike. And so what is it about FCC that's different than other churches? So that was the first thing that I think struck us. And the second is that the discerning of this is a spiritual process. It's not just intellectual. And it asked us to look at where we've been and as well. And so basically, we're going to briefly talk about steps 1 and 2 today, and then present what the author calls a kingdom concept. Now you have to understand, I've been a consultant, so I can say this. We all kind of have our own language so that we can charge, okay? But we're kind of all saying the same thing. And so his concept is kingdom concept. And so that's kind of what we're going to focus on. And then we'll talk about next steps. So we have you approved this in January, just want to remind you. And if you can't remember that and you don't have it, please reach out to somebody on the committee and we will make sure you get a copy of the plan. And if you're a book person, I highly recommend, even as a member of the congregation, that you get the book, Church Unique. So from February to May, we've been working on steps 1 and 2, where we've been trying to find out how is it that we're not alike, that we're different than other churches. Now we call this the whispering legacy, but it's really kind of 3 things. And there were dozens of questions. And so what we did first is everybody on the committee had to answer all the questions and see kind of how we felt about them. And then we narrowed down about 8 questions, so we didn't make you answer all of them. And then we interviewed about 20 people to kind of say, are these the questions that we want? Are they working? We did that, and then we sent them the link to everybody and said, we really want to hear from you. And I think we got a really good response. So basically, the Whispering Legacy looked at 3 things. You'll see what the 3 things, they talk about, where we've been, the things that we raised up in our history. It talks about what's called the local predicament, which means where are we in Houston, what's going on. And then the third thing it talks about is the apostolic esprit. In other words, what gets us up in the morning and what gets us excited. So we took all of that and they have you come up with a very succinct, clear kingdom concept. And so that's the point we're at, and we kind of want to present that to you and get your feedback. And then in the summer, we'll kind of flesh it out on what they call the vision frame. You know, what are our values? What's our mission? How are we going to do it? How do we know when we succeeded? And then we'll bring it back to you in September, and then we've got to implement it and make it work. And then we'll agree on that implementation plan in January of 2022. So our next tag team member is Eric.
Thanks, Lynette. So, yeah, we're going to talk about those first two steps. To me, one of the most unique things about Will Mancini's approach to this visioning process is that it doesn't start with, okay, question is, what's your vision of the future? It starts with looking backwards to our past and really looking at the present. So these two steps here, really can think of the past, the present, so the whispering legacy. You know, we spent June. Sorry, it's June. We've nearly spent half the year just talking about the past and the present before we can get on to the future. But it's really important. So that whispering legacy is looking at what was our origin? How were we created? We do have a unique story of the creation of FCC. And there was this vision about an open church at the time. Being a church that was open to people of any race was an obvious and important aspect. And that's carried through in our openness in a lot of other ways through our history, 65 years. And there are a lot of points along the way. There are many. Most churches would be proud if they had one thing or two things that they could point to and say, we started this. There's a long list of things that we have either started or members of our congregation have started, organizations, initiatives in Houston. So that's part of our whispering legacy. And we look at the visions. There have been lots of vision processes that we've gone through in the past. And we looked at those as well. So that was our first step. And the second thing, which we really took a lot more time on, the kingdom concept. I view it as the kingdom of God. What is our part? How do we do our part of creating the kingdom of God here in Houston or wherever? And he describes that kingdom concept as what is really unique, and he wants us to be very clear about what is unique about FCC, and he phrases it as, what is it that FCC does better than hundreds of other churches in this area? So it's very local. He really wants us to focus on, or urges us to focus on, how are we serving the needs locally, but what is it that we really do uniquely? Because you could say all Christian churches are kind of doing the same thing at one level. And so the three areas of questioning was that local predicament. What are the unique needs and opportunities that are presented where we are in this place, where we are in this time, where we are in our theology, our religion? What are the unique needs and opportunities? And we look then for the overlap of that with the next thing, which is the collective potential. What are the unique resources, strengths, and gifts, capabilities that we have within FCC? So what are the things that are really, hold these three thoughts in your mind. What are the things that are the really big needs and opportunities? And then of that, what are the things that we have strengths for? Where is that overlap? And then the third thing is, where do we get our energy from? So that sweet spot in the middle between the greatest needs here, our strengths and our resources, and where we really get energy, that's where we really excel, where we do better than any other churches at creating our little part of the kingdom of God. And that's what we've been doing. So that's going to come later. What we've come up with, we want to present to you, but I wanted to explain what that meant.
Okay, so
excuse me just 1 minute.
Yeah.
Just for the minutes, I would appreciate it, anybody making a presentation or later on making a motion, if you'd state your name so that Jen can be sure and get that in the minutes. Thank you.
My name is Kelly Stevens. So we are the committee representing you, but the ultimate vision of the church is our vision, your vision, not just ours. So we put out these surveys. The first, when we're looking at the whispering legacy of the church, which as Lynette and Erica mentioned is the creation story of the church. One of the things that we heard again and again, both, actually this is part of the next section too, the vision vocabulary, what words and ideas we identify with. As John says, just about every Sunday, FCC started in 1955 as an open church. And going back into the history of how the church was formed and created, just the vision of the founders to be non-discriminatory and to be against the flow of what was available in Houston today, and well, at the time and still today to some measure, being open and welcoming to all. So starting with a progressive vision and continuing that today, centered in the Christian Reformed tradition. The vision, vocabulary, words, and ideas we identify with. So these are things that people associate with the church. So things that you may see printed in the bulletin, you may see on the walkway, you may hear from the pulpit. So things like faith is a journey and thinking is required, where hearts and minds meet. We are an open church, and of course FCC's mission statement, the welcome, seek, search, support, and strive. The next thing that was mentioned as part of the whispering legacy of FCC, so Hall of Fame notable achievements of FCC, so again the Hymnal Initiative, which has already been mentioned, but which continues to be an accomplishment of the church, and is really a sort of a testament to the music at FCC as a whole. So the hymnal is obviously maybe one of the most recognizable and tangible objects, but again and again we heard how important the music is through the years and still today. Also the achievements and the activities of the people of the church in initiating and or just continuing long-term support of numerous community service organizations. And at first, Chuck had included many of those that were mentioned in the surveys, and I said, well, we don't want to mention them one by one because something won't be mentioned, and then we'll have people who are upset. And then, thankfully, Jamie Strong did that for me during the service. She mentioned, I'm sure not all, but many of these organizations that we've either initiated or supported or both through the years. So thank you, Jamie, if you're still here. Thank you. Took that one off my shoulders. So anyway, so the support of many nonprofits across the board, political action, humanitarian efforts, etc. So the next section being the local predicament. What are the unique challenges in our community? So that refers both to the immediate community, so Hunters Creek Village, just right here, but also expanding to Spring Branch, West Houston, and then really all of the Houston area could be considered our community, especially in today's culture and the way we use technology and how far our reach really is. So beginning with question number 5, what bothers you? So we all answered things like division, separatism, either for us or against us. That sense of being against, you're either for us or against us. Tribalism, the loss of the art of dialogue and consensus, not listening to one another. Legislation regarding immigration and the treatment of immigrants in our society at large. Intolerance, injustice, racism, and violence associated with racism. Question 7, the needs and opportunities. We ask you to help identify those things which we can address. And of course there are many across the board, but one of the things that was mentioned again and again was just the ability, the opportunity to give progressive Christians a home and a larger voice in the Houston area, in Texas. The need to hear our message. So the community community at large. So this would be not just, of course, well, it applies to the immediate area, but also the area at large, Houston, and even beyond. More locally, things like our missions work, addressing physical needs in Spring Branch, assisting neighbors in need. So this would be in the greater area, but more specifically local. People who are nearby, people who we can help that are close to us. Homelessness and hunger. Finally, there is a need for and an opportunity to provide a respite, a solace, a place of acceptance, restoration, and replenishment. Question 9, what's the one thing that we can do to help, that we may be called to help, or that we can do to help the community share our progressive Christian message outside our own walls? I guess that's the verb share there. So not only do we have a progressive Christian message, but we have the need and the opportunity to share that beyond what we're doing. To be in relationship, to partner with others, to increase our reach and our impact, to share our facilities and grounds, share our resources with our immediate community. And finally, to be a refuge from extremism, to be a refuge for those who feel marginalized or ostracized. That's it for the first two, and then Kitty's going to join us for the next two sections.
Well, you've heard where we were, where we came from. Oh, sorry, my name is Catherine Oldie. Everybody calls me Kitty. Been here a long time, recently returned. Now, moving forward, you've heard where we came from. And you've heard what you responded to as what were unique challenges within our community. What I'd like to share are the responses about what are our gifts and our strengths, the things that make us unique. And we did that through questions about how you present the church to the community. And what you told us was that you would tell invitees that we were a progressive church with a progressive Christian message. A need for fellowship and community could be found here. That we were open and affirming, meaning we accept anyone, no matter where they come from and where they are on their faith journey. We also talked about what is the promise you could give to someone that was coming to visit us. You said that you could promise that we would be welcoming, that we would be thought-provoking, definitely true, and that we would challenge, that we have intellectual sermons, particularly identified by many of you, what John Page does for us every Sunday morning. That we would be progressive, not stuck in the past or stuck in the moment, but looking to the future. And that we were friendly. We have our arms open wide. We also talked about what common phrases we use to describe FCC, and I think you've heard a lot of them. It's part of our mission statement. We talk a lot about faith being a journey, but that we need to think about it, where our hearts and our minds meet. We're an open church. And we identified through your responses to the survey the strengths and capabilities of FCC. That we're a progressive voice in the Houston area. That we're smart, that we have intelligent members, that we connect with each other, we connect with our membership. That we have financial resources and that we're stable in that. That we love our music in all of its form and variety. That For me, and reflective of the response that we got to the survey, the growth groups have done an enormous job of bringing people together under these difficult circumstances of the past year. And again, the sermons, i.e. John Page. So where does that leave us? The final portion of our survey was here to talk about where do we go from here? What do we see as the energy of this church? And what you told us is that this church makes a difference. That there are volunteer projects that you can find inspiration through. Being part of a group that is actually helping both the community and creating change for the world at large. Service to others. That we find good friends through growth groups and support and appreciation for one another's skills and talents. And that we do this with a focus on teamwork, involvement, and addressing the human condition. Now, the kingdom's concept of FCC is a unique focus. It's a progressive Christian membership in the Memorial West Houston area. And it's a progressive oasis. And this word oasis came up repeatedly throughout all of the surveys we looked at. In a diverse city, a place to take respite, re-energize. No matter where you come from, no matter where you are on your faith journey. To maintain the traditional feel, and yet to have the opportunity to look at it in a progressive way. That small church in a big city. It's a blend of history and modernism. The history of this church has a huge impact on where we are and where we see ourselves going. And that we like developing partnerships to address the issues that are facing us within our community and within the world at large. And to bring divisions together to be a place where different voices can stand up and be heard without criticism or retribution, but in an open and accepting way. You folks did a lot of heavy lifting in responding to the questions to this survey, and you allowed us to be able to use those responses to move forward on this vision concept.
Thanks, Kitty. Pat, I'm Chuck Stillwell, by the way. All right, so you heard Eric talk about what this kingdom concept is, and again, that's a terminology that a consultant came up with. The guy's a nice guy, a very smart guy, but I have to boil it down to something what I understand. And what I understand the kingdom concept to be is, what's our unique focus? What could FCC do better than many other churches in this community and many others outside of this community? And so all the information that you heard from Kitty and Kelly were boiled down from dozens of survey results, dozens of input from you all. And there's lots of information there. But what we're charged to do is taking that input and trying to come up with what is our unique focus. So, with no further ado, the statement that we're considering the kingdom concept, at least the committee is suggesting or recommending, is an oasis of progressive Christianity. Now, let me try to explain a little bit about that. But the main thing is, it's a simple statement, but it's fairly fully charged with lots of potential. We've heard time and time again, and our history shows, FCC's history shows, that we've always been a progressive church community. It's also a Christian community. And then we come to the term oasis. That was also repeated time and time again in a lot of the survey results. And a lot of people have different views of what an oasis is, a vision is. One view is that you come in to an oasis out of the desert or somewhere where it's less welcoming, and you have some place to go for respite, for solace, to recharge your batteries, to get water, whatever. But it's not just that. It's not just staying there. It's going back out. In other words, we're charged as missional Christians is to go out into the community and show Jesus' love. And so we felt like that oasis concept, that oasis vision, gives gives some meat around how we would be as a church moving forward. The other thing that we did was try to say, if you say this oasis concept, the oasis of Christian or progressive Christianity is kind of the platform with which we stand, what are the legs? What are the things that support that? So in a fairly simple list of things here, we felt like, it's the characteristics that the church has, that the congregation has, that support that oasis of progressive Christianity platform. First is welcoming and affirming to all. And that's all, as in seekers or unchurched people. It's church people that maybe you're not so happy with where they came from. It could be anybody coming in, but feeling like they feel welcome, regardless of where they come from. Second one, openness and curiosity. Another thing that came out was we have a fairly well-educated, but also well-informed and engaged community here. And that actually is a powerful thing. It's a strength of our organization. And not to disparage anybody else, but the thing that we can do, because we have financial resources, we have people that are smart, engaged, and want to do something about it, that's a strength of ours that we should take advantage of. Catalyst. Can be a catalyst for social change and coming together. And to me, my way of saying this is catalyst is a little small thing, but it does big things. So we're a small church. We may grow a little bit, but we're probably going to never be a mega church. But the point here is we are going to be something and an organization that can do big things even though we're relatively small. And lastly, it's congregational led. So that's kind of a root thing. UCC's that way. It's, the Congregational Church is congregational led. That's also a unique thing with respect or compared to a lot of the other Christian churches. And that's again a strength. We come from what we as church members want to do, not necessarily just our leaders. Not to say that we don't have a great leader, of course, but he listens to us a lot, and that's a really big thing too. All right, so what's this FCC as an oasis going to look like? Again, I've already said this, but again, it's a place where people can come in, feel like they're welcome, feel like they can get recharged spiritually, and then go out back into the community and do good, do what Christians should do. And that's an important part of this, is that we shouldn't just consider ourselves a one-way thing. It's a two-way thing. We need to get back out in the community, do the missional work that we have done historically. So with that, we're going to hand it over to Ann, and she'll do a quick wrap-up and tell us where we're going to go from here.
Thank you, Chuck. I'm Ann Amador. So the next steps, our immediate next steps for the committee is to listen to all of your feedback to our presentation and to take that into consideration to help refine, define what our kingdom concept can be, should be. After we've taken that into consideration, the next step is to create a vision frame, which really refines the kingdom concept to the details of it, to include the mission of what we're doing, what the kingdom concept means to us, the values, why the kingdom concept is important to us, the strategy, how we implement kingdom concept, and the measures. When would we be successful? What can we do to measure that the kingdom concept to be successful in this congregation? And after we take all the ideas, we frame it and refine it, and we create a plan to actually implement the vision that comes out of this process. How to communicate our vision to the members, but also outside of the church. How to transition from our current status into the new vision. And then how do we go about getting our members, our staff, our volunteers, what does it look like as far as the organization of the church to be able to implement this? Is what we have currently the best organization to go forward with our visioning? And then the short-term details with the 2022 strategy, when we present this to you at the annual meeting in January, where we stand at that point, what we go forward with from that point as far as the implementation for the vision.
I'm not sure if we want to do questions, or Pat, you give us some guidance, or John maybe wants to say a few things.
Well, thanks for the presentation. I'll ask if anybody has any questions or wants to add anything, or it's a very thorough presentation. So any additional comments?
And also, if people are on Zoom, they can type their comments in the comment book or comment chat, and then one of us can read
good
it out.
point.
So Peter's
We don't want to forget the people on Zoom.
observing all the stuff on Zoom right now.
Okay, well, hearing no additional comments, I'll thank this committee for their presentation and encourage everybody to continue their support and to give this committee feedback as they go on to the next important phase. Okay, the next item concerns whether we should join TMO or not. That's the Metropolitan Organization. This church has been a member of it in the past, and there's a move to rejoin, and so I'll ask somebody to come and present something on that, and hopefully we'll take a vote.
Hi, I'm Robin Stillwell. And today we are going to talk about TMO, the Metropolitan Organization. FCC has a really long history with TMO. TMO was one of those organizations that we have helped found as a congregation over 40 years ago. It is a nonpartisan group made up of interfaith congregations and organizations throughout Houston that are committed to making sustainable social and economic change in their communities. It is also a body that works where congregation members work closely with each other and strengthen our relationships to support our concerns. TMO is a part of a national organization and has an active network with 10 sister organizations throughout Texas. So while FCC was a founding member of TMO, we have not been an institutional member for several years. We have continued to participate in activities and provided some financial support, but we have not been an institutional member. And we have not participated in ways that would be of huge benefit to the life of our congregation and that could really impact the conditions on the west side of Houston. Over the past few years, we have researched and tried to discern what our future is with TMO and what it would look like for FCC to rejoin. So today we have just a brief presentation about TMO to set a context for discussion on what our future with the organization would look like. So I'm going to pass it on to Teresa.
Hi there. I am Teresa Cannon, and I've been asked to say a few words about my experiences with TMO. Our family recently joined FCC back in October after being long-term members of another local congregation. My experiences with TMO are from both a church volunteer perspective as well as a church staff member who worked as the funding liaison for TMO. Through my job, I had the opportunity to get to know the TMO organizers and learn about their work across Houston. As a volunteer, I participated in house meetings in West Houston to determine which issues were important to our congregational members. I heard people tell their stories to one another to find out which issues were most negatively impacting and affecting the lives of members and their families. I also worked on a candidate accountability session, where my role was to encourage representatives of media outlets to attend the session and publish the responses of the candidates running for office on a slate of important issues. It was critical to hold the candidates accountable and see where they stood on important issues, such as immigration, school funding, affordable housing, and the like. In addition, I saw TMO play an important role in Hurricane Harvey relief. Our church had many people who were displaced by the flooding. However, we knew that other areas of town were even harder hit and had people that did not have the financial resources or insurance to rebuild their houses and their lives. Although many people needed help from FEMA and other agencies, they often didn't trust government representatives. However, they did trust their faith communities, and they did trust their congregational leaders. Our church helped fund a program where TMO trained those faith leaders to lead this effort in restoration. Finally, I witnessed TMO's success with advocating for rent assistance during the early days of COVID. TMO was at the forefront of convincing Houston, Harris, and Fort Bend County officials to secure over $200 million for rental assistance that was allocated under the CARES Act. TMO worked with member institutions to bring together struggling families to testify to their experiences of not being able to pay their rent and losing their jobs due to the pandemic. Without TMO, these stories would have only been individual stories. But through TMO, these people were able to speak truth to power in a unified and much stronger way. Now, if you're like me, I often feel overwhelmed by issues that seem too big for one person to do anything about. I see injustices in our community and sometimes feel like it's too hard to make a real difference. But the truth is that when people come together for a common cause, real change can occur. However, it takes a lot of people working together in a concerted effort to cause those in power to become uncomfortable. I've seen TMO identify and train leaders that brought people together to fight injustice in a way that really works. Their model of organizing works to shift power in meaningful and effective ways. But again, they do not bring their agenda to the forefront. They listen to member institutions to determine the issues that are most affecting the lives of community members. One of the things that brought our family to FCC was the emphasis on how social justice issues intersect with our faith. I'm so proud to be a part of an inclusive church that believes that all people are worthy of respect and dignity. I believe being an institutional member of TMO would help FCC to continue its mission to advocate for change and work for peace and justice. Learning how to organize effectively would be invaluable to the important work that lies ahead for our congregation. And I'm happy to serve on the core team for FCC. Thank you for your time and consideration.
I think that is going to be a hard act to follow between Robin and Teresa, but my name is Emily Bounds. I'm an organizer with the Metropolitan Organization. I'm going to take a moment and talk with you all about what you receive as a member institution of TMO. But before I go into that, I do want to tell you, I'm new to the Houston area, and I got started in broad-based organizing through my home congregation, Mayflower Congregational UCC. I spent the last 3 years organizing in West Texas, and I'm happy to be here with you all at FCC. So I've got a slide up here. It's a little small. I don't know if you can see it, but the first thing that member institutions receive is standing in the broader organization. So at TMO, we take institutional life very seriously and understand that institutions are the backbone for our society. And so by joining TMO, you receive standing within other institutions to continue to develop these institutions and our common life. The next is the time and talent of a professional organizer. My job is very simply to identify and develop new leaders in congregations and institutions to strengthen the institution and the community. The next is access to high-quality training and development opportunities. The IAF has trainings like no other. While we are very much known for the work that we do on issues, it's important to understand that truly the work of TMO is about you. It is about your development and the development of human capital within institutions. These are local, regional, and national trainings that you will have access to, as well as trainings that are specifically tailored to the needs of FCC as they arise. The next is participation in seminars. Ernesto Cortez Jr. is our national co-director. He is the recipient of the MacArthur Genius Award and has relationships with academics and professionals across the country. We have done seminars with professors from Harvard, Princeton, MIT, Yale, University of Texas. We speak often with economists from Washington, D.C. and across the country. And for me, as somebody whose education is all in exercise science, I have been the recipient of great knowledge and information around economics, theology, and other topics. Finally, representation in TMO's decision-making bodies. So we have an executive team that a member of FCC would be welcome to join. This is how we make decisions on finances and things such as that within the organization, as well as standing within the Delegates Assembly, which is where we decide on issues and the next steps of the organization. So I am happy to answer any questions in the future, but now I'll throw this to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, just a few things to say about some practical details with joining TMO. What would that mean for FCC and us? The first thing is, here's one thing that I'm keen on, and this is one of the things we'll have to discuss. So this is a proposal that I'm making, but I've been involved in two prior congregations that have been involved in IAF organizations, and also I interned for an IAF organization when I was in seminary. So I have some experience with this group, not nearly as much obviously as someone like Emily, but some experience. And one of the things that I'd like to avoid if we decide to join TMO is to have TMO be something that is easily sequestered off from the vibrant life of the congregation. Because what TMO is about, fundamentally, is community organizing. And it begins with organizing ourselves. So community organizing, this is relational organizing, and it works by getting to know your neighbor better. And the idea is, if I know you, whoever you are, and you know me, and I've got an issue, you'll show up for my issue because you have a relationship with me. Just like in FCC, when you've got to call someone up as a volunteer for something, you call someone you know. And sometimes you're like, I don't want to say yes, but it's so-and-so calling, so I'm going to say yes. That's the way relational organizing works. And the reason why it's exciting for a church like FCC is because it requires us to deepen our relationships with one another so we actually know more about one another and we get organized as a congregation. And when that happens, then when we have relational meetings, when we go to house meetings where we'll gather with one another and also with other communities of faith to figure out what are the issues that are actually affecting your life, yours, and the other people there, not someone across town, or your life. What are the issues that keep you up at night? What are going to motivate you to get up and make a change? What thing in your neighborhood or something that affects you? In order to do that, it's an entire culture of organizing, of relational organizing within a church. And so one of my proposals is I really don't want TMO to be something that the CIS board runs. Because the CIS board does a phenomenal job about getting us excited about advocacy, about taking the lead in our advocacy efforts, both locally and nationally and statewide, and we need that. But I'm afraid that if TMO is directed by the CIS board. One, that's us putting one more thing on the CIS board's plate, and they already have a lot on their plate. But secondly, it will prevent us from, as a congregation, getting organized and deepening our relationship. It's about all of us. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what the meeting is. I mean, the ideal, the dream would be, and I know churches that have done this, where every board meeting you have, you take the first 10 minutes to just have a brief one-on-one with someone there and get to know them a little bit deeper. And I'm not talking about where you went to coffee or things like that, but what's going on in your life. Those types of stories are what bind us together and support us as a church, and that's the way that kind of relational organizing works. Because, some of the stories I've heard about our relationship with TMO in the past is that basically it was Jan Wilbur who did TMO, and then she'd bring in some other people from time to time, but it never got into the DNA of the congregation in the way that I think it can and should at a place like FCC. So part of the proposal is to have TMO be something that actually sits underneath council, and to have a core team that's an evolving core team. That if anyone wants to get involved, the more the merrier. As our core team expands, we have a group of people now who are willing to step forward and take the lead on this and are excited about this. And if we join this, I every confidence that the core team will keep expanding, and some people will drop out, others will come in. And I think it actually works best in that organic fashion, because some people feel called with certain issues to step forward or to get involved in ways that don't necessarily fall into our annual meeting elections. So that's sort of the proposal, and I think it would be great to try and see what we can do with it, because I think it has a huge benefit for us as a congregation. Now, joining an organization like TMO does come with dues. There are dues that are involved. It's a dues-paying organization. Institutions pay dues. And the dues that they suggest are 1% of the operating budget of the organization, up to a maximum of $15,000. So this is great for organizations like Chapelwood that have like a $10 million plus budget, so they only have to pay $15,000, not 1% of their budget. But we would be called on to pay 1% of our operating budget, which was what we used to pay when we were members before. So for us, that would be, I think, roughly $4,500, roughly. And again, it's on an honor system. I don't think TMO is going to sit down with our budget and be like, did you do this? I want an extra $15. So what that would mean is if we were to join it, I think a good faith effort on our behalf. And again, the past 2 years, we've given money to TMO because we know we've taken their organizers' time. And we've worked with them. And so we wanted to pay for that time because we know that time is valuable. People like Emily actually have to pay their bills. And they get their money from dues-paying churches like ours. So the proposal would be that we would pay 6 months of dues for 2021. And one of the questions might be, well, how do we do that? That's roughly $22.50 in terms of cost of what it would mean to join. Now, one of the things that's nice is that I got notification the other day that some church members were anonymously willing to put forth $500 of that initially as a start towards our goal, which is really generous. We know that there is some money that's unallocated within the CIS board, and if the CIS board chooses to vote on that, they might be able to allocate some of that money towards TMO, because there is some money there for that. And so my hope is that some money might come from that, from their budget if they so decide. No matter what, it's still going to leave us, minimum about $1,200 short. And I think this seems like a great opportunity to have a fun summer fundraiser where we get together and actually be church and have a fun party. The plan was, the proposal was to do this over Labor Day. I'm like, what perfect imagery. Advocating for labor over Labor Day. It's actually like the real Labor Day purpose, not like what we think of when we go relax. The real Labor Day purpose, raising money to help folks. And so like you could do like, pay money to, say, for instance, throw a pie at the minister or dunk the minister in a tank or whatever we could do to raise funds. Like, I'm game. But one of the things, especially coming out of the pandemic, one of the things I'd love to do is just have fun with you all. We didn't have an auction, this year. We've had an auction in the past. It's raised a ton of money, way more than that. I mean, again, we've had some fantastic auctions that Christian was running that we could easily cover that cost with something like that. I mean, there are ways that we can do it. I think there are ways we can do it and have fun. So that's my bit. Who's up next? Christian, you up next or something? Oh, okay. So I guess we now have a conversation.
I just want to make this one comment. You know, it's just been incredibly inspirational to be a part of the Visioning Committee. You know, and especially to read the history of FCC and to kind of affirm what an amazing oasis of progressive Christianity we have been and we are, and I believe we will continue to be. And I find it prophetic that we're in this process, and Teresa is here, and Emily is here, and we're talking about TMO. I mean, I feel the Holy Spirit talking to us about us being a part of an organization that could enliven us as an entire congregation in many, many ways. So I'm thrilled that we're at this point.
Yeah, one final thing I'll note. One of the things I like about Saul, has anyone here read Saul Alinsky, the sort of founder of the IAF? Anyone read a lot of Saul Alinsky? He's quite a personality, and his personality comes through in his writing. But he's one of these people where he has this great thing where he's like, he's like in his organizing efforts, he's like, I try and organize churches around, things like being a good person, altruism, helping others. And occasionally a few people will show up and, some people get involved. But it's funny, like, let's say there's like a problem with the roof in the church. Then everyone shows up. Because it's a question of self-interest. That fundamentally, if you want to organize people to do work, at some point you got to touch on self-interest. You got to motivate people. And so the fun thing about an organization like the IAF is that it runs on a very honest assessment of self-interest. Part of this is it's our self-interest to join an organization like TMO so we can get along with other organizations and do the work that matters to us. So what issue matters to you in your community? Let's say your community let's say your community school is doing something where you think their curriculum, say for instance, is not trans-friendly enough. And you have a kid who might be transgender, and this is something that fires you up. Well, now you've got a group of people to go do that with. Again, let's say you have a kid who's got some learning needs that aren't being addressed by the local school system. Your kid. Or someone that you know. Well, now you've got a group of people you can go change that with. If there's something in your life, in your community that you want changed, well, now you can do it with other people. It's a self-interested thing. Because that's what fires you up, fundamentally. And so joining this is about us saying, we want to go do more stuff in our community to make our community better and more like we want it to be. And we can do that. And you can do it better with other people. So this is the whole thing. This is not about, this is going to drain us and oh gosh. It's like, no. This is what fires you up. So, yeah, comments.
Excuse me just a minute. I think it might be appropriate at this point to ask for a motion and then have discussion on the motion to join. So would it be appropriate for someone at this point to make a motion to join TMO?
I propose we join TMO for the 6 months as John has described.
And please state your name for the minutes.
I'm Mary Harvey.
We all know everybody, but still I think it's a good idea to make sure Jen. Yeah.
We need a second?
Okay, we're appropriate for discussion now. Second. Oh, yes, second. Okay.
Jim Becker seconds? Okay. Now, Julia.
Discussion?
Thank you. I'm Julia Land, and I have a question. We talked about the financial obligations. Joining an organization like this is not where you just pay your money, and we do what we do amongst ourselves. What would be our obligations to the organization as a whole if we do decide to participate in TMO?
That's a great question. So as Congregationalists, we are familiar with a covenantal relationship. So as TMO, we are committing to FCC. As FCC, we are committing to TMO. We would ask for participation in our leaders' meetings. We have a statewide meeting coming up where we will be updating on issues. We already have a few people registered for that. But the greatest thing in the next steps are for the core team to discern the interest of the congregation. So the core team will be learning themselves and reaching out to each of you all as members of the congregation for conversations, for relationship, to understand interest. So that would be the general commitment. Does that make sense? Any further question? Sounds very vague. Well, what do you want more specific on? I'll give it to you.
Julie, use the mic, please.
So, I'm sorry. It sounds like what you're saying is all we need to do is attend meetings. Is that it? I mean, is that what happens? Is that all we have to do?
So I'd say there's several steps. One is continuing to build relationships at FCC, one-on-one with one another. To then participate in house meetings, both locally in our congregation and with other congregations, as we discern what are the issues that motivate us. Out of that will come a series of issues that then TMO, both on the west side and TMO across Houston, will identify as the issues that we want to work together on as an organization, either because we have the broadest support or because we think we can actually move the dial on it. At that point, we'll be looking for people to lead the drive on these issues. So we'll need folks who are motivated by these issues who will do research on behalf of others. When this model works really well, the issues that you focus on, you drill down really deeply. I remember when I was in New Haven and someone didn't like, one of the people really didn't like the check cashers, that prey on folks who don't have bank accounts. And so one of the things they did was they looked at in the deed records who owned every different check cashing thing, so they knew where they lived and they knew where they got their money from, and they wanted to make sure, how can we put pressure on those individuals to change some of their practices? I mean, it's like intense research. Which political leaders do we need to pressure? So you get on issue teams to research that. So some people might feel compelled to do that. And then there are these opportunities to actually go to accountability sessions where we can go to legislators and put pressure, lawmakers and put pressure on them. Then that would be trying to get as many of us as we can to show up, to show our power and show how many people are there. Then after those, we then take back and we put right here in the narthex something that says, okay, here are the issues that TMO cares about, and here's what these different law people say on it. You can vote however you want, but this is what TMO does. This is part of our covenantal responsibility to say, this is where TMO stands on these issues, and this is where these lawmakers stand. You make up your own mind now, so that the lawmakers know that there are consequences for their actions. So that type of stuff is sort of the basic level. And again, as Emily was saying, maybe someone from this congregation will serve on that executive committee for the citywide TMO. I know that Jan Wilbur was very involved for a long time in that. So that's one of those things. I think each congregation has the chance to have a delegate sit there. That is a little bit more of a time commitment for someone, but at least that's an opportunity. Me as a clergy person, I'll be meeting with other clergy who are in TMO locally. That's a commitment that I'll make to build those relationships. Hopefully does that answer your question, Julia? Okay.
So Gary Worrell, I guess my question is, we were part of the founding group, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, we disappeared. Why did we disappear, or what was the reason for getting out of TMO in the first place? I'd like to understand the history a little more.
Does someone who's been around for a long time want to speak? I mean, I can speak from conversations I've had with certain folks, but if someone who's been around longer wants to speak to that, they can. Eric?
Yeah, Eric.
Well, Eric Tonsky, I was just going to say Jan Wilbur was the first president or presiding officer of TMO in Houston, and she was very deeply involved. When we came here, she was still deeply involved in trying to get more community members, or more members of FCC involved in it. But it's true, as John said, that we didn't have a very active core team that was very involved in what TMO was doing. When Jan passed away, I was on the board of CIS, and we looked at it and said, this really requires a lot of involvement, engagement, commitment, and we were not there. And that's when we took the decision to terminate or not to renew our institutional membership, that $5,000, $4,000 budget, and we continued to support it, but we had to kind of step back and figure out, again, why we should be involved, how we should be involved, and relearn that. And because Jan was really the one who was carrying the torch.
Yeah, exactly. My impression is Jan invited various people. I know Mary, I think, talked about being invited to different events and different people to come to these meetings. But without the background work of the relationships, of building the relationships, of doing the house meetings, of getting fired up with the issues, of being involved in the issue teams, if the congregation's not involved, and then the one person who's leading the charge gets cancer and then dies, it's very easy to see how an organization looks around and say, well, we haven't been involved in a while, really, as a congregation. Now, the good news is that there are a lot of people with a history with TMO. So when we showed up at the delegates, the accountability session, For the mayoral's race, the last mayoral's race, we weren't a member of TMO, and we showed up with like 25 people to this delegate assembly. And say, for instance, Chapelwood has been a longtime member and it's a slightly larger church than we are. I think had like 3 or 4 people there, and we had like 25. And the reason why we were able to get that many people is because there's some people who remember TMO and remember going to those assembly sessions. But what I'm saying is, if we're going to do it right, we have to have we have to do it, and we have to take a different approach than just, oh, this is Jan Wilbur's thing, and she runs with that. It's got to be a congregational thing. Mary, you want to add anything or no?
Over here.
Hi, all. Jen Powis, the clerk. I'm just wondering if you could name the core team for the notes. Or
Right.
do
So
you have the core team.
Yes. So the people that we have now who've been working on this include me, include Teresa Cannon, include Emily Bounds as sort of organizer, leading us and charging us ahead. Kathy Elmore, who I saw somewhere. I don't know if she's still around. Oh yeah, there she is. Prisha Lines, and Mary Lou Strange, and Robin Stillwell, and Janet Rexroad. Again, they're everywhere. Just look around there. It's like popcorn. And hopefully a church visitor who hasn't been able to come to our meetings yet, but a little hardcore press might be able to get him involved. And potentially Karen, your name's been tossed around, Karen, as someone to be excited. So, she's nodding. Look at this. There are volunteers just popping up everywhere. If we keep asking, we'll get even more.
Any further discussion?
So, Peter, is there something on the chat?
Yeah, 2 questions are online, and so you need to repeat them in the microphone.
Yep.
First is a question, is TMO an organization that has progressive values?
Is TMO an organization that has progressive values? That's an excellent question. I can give a stab at it. Emily can give a stab at it. So TMO is an organization that is a member organization, and it's a community organizing organization. So the issues that they focus on and the values they focus on come from the member institutions and the issues that arise from those members. Given the membership nature of TMO, it tends to be very progressive on most issues. So most issues, TMO will have a strong stance on. So in terms of criminal justice reform, in terms of issues of immigration or issues of healthcare, these types of issues, they've long, for gun violence, stuff like that, they've taken strong stances on. Since the early days of the IAF across the country, part of the backbone of the IAF in many communities, including Houston, includes a lot of Roman Catholic parishes. So one of the realities of TMO is that while they get involved in a lot of issues, there are certain issues they don't because of the strong presence of the Roman Catholic Church involved in TMO. So that's just a reality. So some issues, particularly on LGBT rights or reproductive rights, TMO will likely not get involved in. The good news is that if those issues matter to us and we want to organize around those, there are plenty of people in the community that we can and do, and will continue to organize on those. But that's a great question. Emily?
If I could add to that, so when I got into the organizing work as a leader at Mayflower UCC, I went to my organizer one day and I said, I'm gay, can I show up in this Catholic church and talk? And, well, I don't know if I can say actually what she said to me in response, but I felt supported. We'll just say that. The other thing that she said to me is, I don't care if you're gay, straight, or purple, if you have a high electric bill that is unjust, we need to do something about it. Gay people have pressures too. And we live our lives worried about healthcare and retirement and safety, just like everybody else. And the IAF has given me the opportunity to work on those things.
One of the rules that the IAF comes up with, at least that I was taught early on, was in the IAF, there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. And that's sort of a classic political thing that people know, and that's something you got to know. If you can have friends and allies to work with on an issue, politics makes strange bedfellows. So be it. You sort of work on your issues. You might find yourself working with folks you wouldn't expect to find yourself working with, but that's the way things get done, and you have to be flexible about that. It's sort of one of their principles. Peter, there's another question?
Yeah, the second question was the question about the Roman Catholic Church. So,
So the second question was about the involvement of the Roman Catholic Church, and yes, the Roman Catholic Church is very involved in the Houston area, and it's very involved in other parts of the country. And again, what I will say, when I was doing my internship in New Haven with the IAF style group there, the most involved church was this Roman Catholic parish. And it was a Roman Catholic parish that had something like 20 different nationalities in it. I think about 2/3 of the parish was undocumented. And it was a big parish with several thousand people very engaged. And it was inspiring to see because you had these undocumented people working as janitors who were actually standing up and talking to lawmakers, trying to demand more services for them and for their families. And I can guarantee you this Catholic Church that was so organized and focused on things were focused on issues that mattered to them. And they were willing, and they wanted to have allies working with them who shared those values. And so, again, the Catholic Church has certain, pitfalls working with them. It's not just the Catholic Church, but yes, their involvement is there, and it's something that's real.
The other thing with this is, sure, we have differences. We have differences with the Methodists. We have differences with the Unitarians. We have differences with the Jewish community. We have differences with the Muslims. But guess what? We also have a lot of similarities. And this is about negotiation of interest.
Hi, I'm Kathy Elmore, and I didn't really prepare, so.
If you'd hold the mic a little closer to your mouth.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kathy Elmore, and I just wanted to say I'm new to FCC, and I kind of stumbled on TMO, and they let me just join whatever I wanted, whatever active group I wanted to participate in. And that was a local police reform group who I feel like helped push our mayor to do something about the issues of that confront our city, especially with the community of color. And so I feel like I just mostly watched how they worked, but it's really a nice thing to connect with all different congregations from all over the city. And I think I would say, don't make eye contact if you don't want to volunteer. There are a lot of opportunities. And the other thing I thought that I think we could make a big difference on for our whole city, the freeze in February, I feel like we can move that needle. We are smart people, we can do the research, and we can push our legislators to do something about that for the people who cannot afford, insurance if their plumbing leaks. So anyway, they let me join even though we weren't paying dues, and they let me participate. So I just thought I would tell you guys that.
And that brings up a great point. I mean, TMO is explicitly nonpartisan because it's all about the issues. And again, you might get strange bedfellows. And the freeze is a perfect example. You get people across the political spectrum to say we need change, and you're going to get real change happening because it affected everyone. So, any other comments?
Further discussion?
Mary? Okay, that's so calling the question is a.
Okay, she's called the previous question.
Things, so you need a two-thirds vote.
So we need a 2/3 vote to end discussion at this point. So all in favor of ending discussion at this point, raise your hand. Okay, that carries. So now we'll proceed to the vote on the motion. So the motion is to join TMO. So all in favor of that, please raise your hand. Okay, I think it's unanimous, but it's certainly the motion carries.
Do you want to say who we can?
What's that?
I don't know. We want to give an opportunity to see people opposed. They might want to be.
Oh yeah. Anybody? I'm sorry. Opposed? Okay, we have one opposed. Okay.
And there might be some on the Zoom as well.
Yeah, online, yes is 9 and no is 2.
Okay, great.
Okay. So the motion carries.
Great.
Okay, the next and last major item on the agenda is a report from the Campus Beautification Committee.
I want to move to have that member ejected from the... I know she has to go home and get ready for a baby shower anyway. Gosh, this is the perfect position to be in the end of presentations. This is just I'm going to go through this very quickly. This is more just an informative presentation. Oh, my name is Kenneth Schneider, and I'm representing the Campus Beautification Committee and just providing an update. So, quick, next slide, please. All right. Uh-oh. Oh, is it not? Yeah, there you go. That's not. Well, maybe this will be just a very. Well, I can tell you what the next slide. We're just going to outline what I'm going to talk about. First of all, I'll just give you a little background. Okay, give a little background of where the Campus Beautification Committee came from, and talk about like what we are going to be asking, what direction we've set, which is to prepare a landscape master plan for the campus. Talk a little bit about the process, and then there are a few takeaways that I wanted to make sure everybody had, and those are the ones where you have to start taking notes. Background, as y'all, most of y'all know, David Nichols passed away last year, left the church a very generous bequest, and during the annual meeting in January, the church, the members elected to use that money to invest in the appearance and enhance the appearance of the church grounds. That was something that was very close to David. With that direction, council appointed an ad hoc group to say, okay, what does that really mean? We met, came back and said, after we looked around, we said, what we need is sort of an overall plan. We don't want to just go start planning things here and there and making changes. So we came back to council in February. They said, great idea, y'all go do it. So that's where the Campus Beautification team got started. Now the process that, what I want to talk about, what do I mean by a landscape master plan? When we're done, you're not going to see new plants put in somewhere. You're not going to see new benches installed. What we're going to do is we're going to create a conceptual document that lays out our vision of what we want this campus to look like. I think it's very analogous to the visioning process that we're going through right now. Once we have that document, then as a congregation we'll say, okay, we're ready to start spending money and time to do this part of the plan, move on to the next part of the plan, and we'll be able to prioritize what's meaningful to us. So no change there. So the process that we went through is the committee got together. We wanted to go ahead and engage a professional landscape architect or designer. We put together a list of sort of a laundry list of things that we wanted to consider doing, the physical changes, but we also critically said, these are things that are our design principles that we want anyone that we hire to follow. So we prepared that document. We researched, found 5 landscape architect firms that we contacted, and they said, oh yeah, they'd be interested in reading our request and then submitting proposals. So we sent those out. We got one proposal back. Most of the people said, we really just don't have the time and resources to take on another project. So we looked through that one proposal. Part of what they provide is references for us to talk to and sample projects for us to go see. So we talked to those references, we visited those sample projects, and we came back and said, we like these people. we feel comfortable working with these people. And so as a team, we said, do we need to go out and ask for more proposals? And we decided no. We think we found the one we want to work with. So we've met with them. We hired them formally. All that, coordinating with council. We had an initial meeting with them, and the process will be that they will go through, collect our laundry list, look at, they'll walk the site and say, hey, here's what we see with our professional eye. They'll come back and say, this is sort of blue sky, everything you might want to try. We winnow that down and say, okay, these are what we want you to focus on. They'll come back with a preliminary design that says, okay, this is what we heard you tell us. Once we look over that, fine tune it, we say, yes, that's it, move on. The process is right there. Yeah, I don't have a big long list of these. I wasn't going to make y'all read the slide yet. That's next. And then once we give them that direction, they'll then put together the formal master plan that becomes our vision, our landscape master plan. Now, the first working meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, and that's when they bring their blue sky ideas. It'll be about 3 weeks or so after that they expect to have the preliminary design. So let's say early to mid-July. At that point, what the committee wants to do is sort of take a break from working with them and start engaging and sharing that information in more detail with the congregation. The how, we don't really know. If y'all want, we can do another congregational meeting like this. No, okay. We're assuming that we'll be far enough along and through the pandemic that we'll be able to have smaller groups, meeting like in the assembly room or something like that. And it depends on your interest. And then also we'll publish what we can, figure out some way to get it out where y'all can share it and look at it. And then by all means, your committee is a key resource to ask questions and send information back to what we should take to the design process. Now, okay, the takeaways. This is where you start taking notes. We thought it was important to share the guidance that we were giving these people. It's like what we thought was important to us as a congregation. And so I'm going to just read these, basically. So first thing, we want to create an aesthetically pleasing, sacred space, welcoming and open to all. Generally, we want to leave the open space like we have. We do a lot of things with it. You're not going to show up here one day and find out that we've built the Versailles on the bayou. That's not the goal. Okay, next slide. We want to use native plants. We're not going to get in a bunch of exotics that are going to freeze out again. We want to select plants and landscape things that low maintenance. We recognize that anything you put out there you have to maintain, and that's either money or time, both of which are precious commodities. Finally, we want to reuse the plant components and systems that we have here. We are not going to bulldoze the site and start over. Now, we shared this information from day one with the group, the people that prepared proposals for us. But just a few weeks ago, John gave an update on the visioning process, and we said, that's important information that we want to share with them also. So the next slide, there it is. We said, y'all need to be aware of this. FCC is going to be an oasis and a refuge. FCC will be a place that refreshes and restores all who visits. And we want to engage people in a spiritual and intellectual way. So as they work for us, as we work as your representatives, these are the guiding principles that we want to follow. Now, at this point, like I said, the first working session is Wednesday, and we'll start sharing after that probably in July. But the key way that we have to communicate with you guys is through the committee. We've talked among ourselves. We've reached out to other boards and committees to get input about what makes sense from them, what needs they see. We'll start doing more communication through the weekly email blast. But really, the committee is the key resource that you have right now. And so what I want to do is introduce the members of that committee. First one, I'll start, and the committee, the people I want to introduce have been on it from the beginning when council came up with an ad hoc group and asked them to look into this. So first one is Ann Amador, which she stood up for. Now the next slide I'm going to show, this is a new member. There you go. Catherine Hargrave. She joined a couple of months before we shut down last year. She's been a wonderful asset. She wasn't going to be here today, but when I asked her, do you have a photo you mind me sharing? This is what she gave me. So she's all somewhere enjoying the countryside. Now, another member of the committee is Christia Lines, Tom O'Neill, and now this is where I need my list. I know I'm leaving someone out. Oh, Linda Cooner, of course. The one actual landscape person that's been working around the campus. I knew I was going to do that. And then myself. So we were part of that the original group. There was one other member of that original group who had stepped back because of time commitments, but remains an ex officio member, and that's John Page. But we added another ex officio member with Howard Strong when he took over the day-to-day operations of the trustees. We wanted to keep trustees involved because they're responsible for the site. So that is where we are. Again, reach out, talk to us. We're your resource. You're our resource. And now y'all can go have lunch, I guess. Unless there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Kenneth. Any questions for Kenneth? Yeah. Yeah. We have a question here. So. Michael Schaefer.
I'll try to keep this serious. Kenneth, is there any thought in your planning to make this campus energy independent or sufficient? Michael Schaefer, by the way.
All right. Very good question. This committee has not taken that as part of its charge. Now, I know that there has been discussions, informal discussions in the trustees committee to say, what can we do for something like that? We took our charge as like everything outside the building, if you will, and improvements to the site. So no, we have not considered that. I've got some ideas though.
I can speak loudly enough. Michael Schaefer again. Well, I thought it would be, it seems to me that would be an important consideration, not just related to buildings only, but any installation that might involve energy or like sun or solar would obviously involve the concept or consideration from a landscaping point of view. So that was the reason I asked that.
No, and that's a good point because you're right. If we decide that we want to plant a bunch of trees that would then block the sunlight falling on the roof, and that's the type of thing we want some ideas about. Well, what should we be considering in the future? Because it'd be great to say we want this beautiful grove of trees right here. It turns out that's the absolute best place in the world to do something else that we didn't have to either not do that or bulldoze that grove of trees we planted a few years ago. So we'll tuck that away.
I'm George Howe, and I just have a couple of comments about what's gone on before, and it's something that I think that the committee, first of all, I'm delighted that you have this beautification committee, if you will, doing this work. I wanted to point out that Bob Tucker had developed several years ago a biblical garden, and that is with plants that are from the Bible, and that was along the memorial walkway over here. There are a few trees, I think, still remaining that were given in memory of the parents and loved ones of some of the members. And lastly, I know that one of our previous ministers wished to have a biblical maze, some sort of a maze, a contemplative place where the community.
Oh, labyrinth, yeah.
And so that's an idea that I wanted to share with you. Thank you.
Very good. To touch on that, that brings up, first of all, it reminded me that I didn't even tell you the name of the people that we've hired, that you have hired. It's an outfit called West Oak Studios, White Oak Studios, so, White Oak Studios. And they have done, one of the reasons that we literally picked them by looking through all the websites out there was because they've done quite a bit of work with churches. So we feel like that's a good match. That we'll tuck that away about the biblical garden. One thing that also reminded me is that when we gave them like, here's your scope of work, we actually drew a bounds around the memorial garden area and said, we don't go in there and mess with that. You can make suggestions around the periphery, but because of the way that we have used that lawn space, we don't want to go in there and change it around. But that wouldn't affect the potential biblical garden. And we'll make a note about the labyrinth.
Okay, any other comment? I'm sure that Kenneth would welcome any additional suggestions in the future, and we may have some from online here.
Yeah, two for online, so please repeat it into the microphone. The first one is a comment that encourages a peace garden or a sculpture garden to be included.
Okay, the comment was that encourage that we have a peace garden. Okay. Yes. No, the second comment was, can we recruit more women to be on the committee? At this point, to be honest with you, we don't want to. The plan is not to change the composition of the committee just because of the involvement that they've already invested, and don't want to lose that. The experience, the institutional knowledge of the few months.
But that wouldn't keep any number of women from making suggestions to Kenneth.
That said, I want to encourage anyone to reach out to us, to one of the members, and help guide us on that. There's a question here.
Just real quick, just so you know, we're already our half women.
This is Tom O'Neill making the observation that we are there, that half the membership now are women. So. Any other comments? Please don't stop making comments just because we all want to go to lunch. We want, that's why I want to identify the committee and encourage you to reach out to us and share your thoughts and ideas. Anything else? Going once?
Okay.
Going twice? Sold.
Well, okay, the last item on the agenda would be any further business, and if you have any, I think you should consider grumbling stomachs.
Well, yes, it's really just a question, if I may. Is there any, in light of the recent changes from CDC, has the board come out with any new guidelines as to what we're going to be doing? I just thought you might make a comment while we had everybody together.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Regarding mass and worship and services and doing fellowship after church, are we changing anything? Are we talking about changing anything? What's the update from the board?
Yeah,
So just we again, our phase one is relaxing social distancing. We realize that the CDC, for people who are vaccinated, they can take their masks off. We know that we don't want to be checking people's vaccination cards at the door, and we honestly can't guess what people are doing. So right now we're maintaining masks. Certainly at the next council meeting we'll reconsider that. I'm carefully watching the number of cases in Houston. As those decline, I think people will feel safer. I know that the hospitality board will start talking about coffee, tea, and conversation, and when we want to bring that back, and that's an ongoing conversation. So this is sort of slowly evolving. In the office, on the day-to-day work in the office now is reopening, and we are not wearing masks in there on a day-to-day basis. So the last sort of straw is in here with people singing, which can be potentially dangerous if people are infected, and because there are folks who are potentially in an age range, especially where that might be, we're just trying to be cautious, but we're going to continue to monitor it.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to end this by singing hymn number 1, which is sort of traditional. Let's do first and last verse, please.
All right.
I could ask John to close us with prayer, please.
And now let us pray. O Holy One, we thank you for being present with us during our deliberations and during the life and work of First Congregational Church. As we go out today, let us be your hands working in the world, and may you inspire us today to do one act of compassion to bring your Spirit more deeply, more fully to those around us. All this we pray in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn. Everybody moves, so all in favor, leave.